Greetings and welcome to another patch notes video here at Words About Games, a fortnightly video series that lets us host discussions and post opinion pieces about our various thoughts on games, gaming, and the industry. Today I'm going to furnish you with yet another list, because that's the popular thing to do and it's actually quite a bit easier than doing a full essay, and with E3 right around the corner and my time becoming ever increasingly more limited and this not being the video I actually wanted to make because of time constraints, I need to do something a bit quicker and easier. E3 is right around the corner. The hype train is leaving the station. My body is ready, except for whatever delights Devolver Digital has cooked up for us, and I thought I'd make a list of the games I'm most looking forward to seeing at this year's show. 15 of them to be precise. The first 10 games are based on what's been announced, but also what we can reasonably expect, and what's been more or less confirmed by leaks and other sources. The last 5 are a bit more out there, although still based on rumours and leaks, with a dash of wishful thinking thrown in for good measure. Anyway, enough washful. Let's get on with the list. At the Star Wars celebration, we were introduced to the world of Fallen Order and its protagonist Cal Kestis, a Jedi Padawan on the run from the Inquisition following the downfall of the Jedi Order. It's a great premise for a solid action-adventure game set in the Star Wars universe, and a story I dare say fans of the series have wanted to see for a while. But Respawn Entertainment and EA probably correctly surmised that while the Star Wars Celebration was the place to unveil the story, setting, and characters of the game, that E3 would be the best place to reveal the gameplay. And so, in what is a strange experiment for how a major publisher can reveal games at the yearly show, EA are giving us half an hour to see what Fallen Order is all about. I have full faith that the game will be impressive. Respawn have easily earned the benefit of the doubt, and fast-paced, satisfying action gameplay is definitely in their wheelhouse. See Titanfall and Apex Legends. And given how surprisingly excellent Titanfall 2's campaign was, I'm confident the developer can give us a memorable, compelling experience on all fronts. And while I'm not convinced by EA's approach to this year's E3, I am looking forward to seeing it all come together as far as Fallen Order is concerned. I'm deeply intrigued by what kind of experience 343 Industries is cooking up for Halo Infinite. Last year, Microsoft broke the long-running 3-year release cycle for new main series Halo games, offering us a brief glimpse of the game and confirming its name and existence at E3, but precious little else, except to say that it would be a no-show in 2019. My intrigue stems from what's delayed the game, and the potential ambitions of the Halo developer. 343 have made no secret of the fact that it's taken on board some tough lessons from 2015's underwhelming Halo 5 Guardians, and that they would be applying those lessons to the next game in the series. Indeed, the longer than normal development time suggests that 343 have taken things back to the drawing board. And then there's the teaser. Aside from learning that Halo Infinite is running on the Slipspace engine, which is a fairly meaningless fact given we know nothing about the engine and haven't seen it actually do anything, the only other thing we really saw were vast open environments on a Halo installation. Perhaps these were simply showing us how pretty the engine itself is, or perhaps 343 are developing something with grander ambitions than merely being another game in the Halo series. Either way, I'm expecting to come away from this year's Microsoft briefing with a lot more information about just what Halo Infinite actually is. It's been long enough since the launch of Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, give or take a couple of ports in a VR mode, that we should be about ready to see what Ninja Theory have been cooking up for the past couple of years. Of course, it's an entirely different landscape for the studio now. They're no longer the scrappy underdog that developed games like Enslaved, DMC, Heavenly Sword, or Kung Fu Chaos. They're a first-party Xbox game studio with all the backing and support that entails. And so the timing couldn't have been more on the nose for the developer to file a trademark for something called Bleeding Edge earlier this year. The rumblings point to this being some kind of sci-fi game, which could have something to do with a game called Razor they talked about in a blog post a while back. Razor was a project that was never greenlit, one which was a multiplayer co-op action game that had tons of awesome looking concept art. There's a pretty good chance that Bleeding Edge has nothing to do with Razor, but having seen the art that Ninja Theory worked on, and knowing that I've enjoyed every game of theirs I've played, yes, even DMC, I'm hyped to see what they can do now that they've got the backing of Microsoft behind them. Whether it's a co-op sci-fi action game or something else entirely, I'm eager to see it during the Xbox press conference. It's difficult to mention indie games on a list of game reveals to get hyped for when it comes to E3, or at any given moment in time, really. While the AAA industry is fairly easy to predict most of the time, indie games are much more chaotic, and it can be hard to foresee who's working on what or what's coming up. Who could have guessed that Mike Bethel would follow up a platformer about geometric shapes with feelings with a stealth game inspired by classic Metal Gear Solid? But there's one game I'm reasonably hopeful we'll see something of, while simultaneously being so unsure that I've debated whether to put it here at all. Witchbrook from Chucklefish Games, developers of Starbound and publishers of Stardew Valley, was announced in 2017 and immediately captured my attention. Witchbrook is an adventure game set at a magic school somewhere between Hogwarts and Little Witch Academia, with a focus on world exploration and inter-character relationships, and gameplay inspirations including Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley, and, as far as combat goes, early Legend of Zelda titles. Details have been scarce in the intervening 2 years about Witchbrook, but hopefully with Chucklefish confirmed to be in attendance at the PC gaming show, now is the time to peel back the curtain and show us a little of the game. My level of anticipation for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 is something that cannot be measured by human technology. The reveal of the game, which I long thought would never actually happen despite my intense desire for it, shook me when I glanced at my phone to see the press release I'd long dreamt I'd see. I think I actually screamed. That this isn't just a legendary name attached to a game that has little to do with its predecessor is what stokes the fires of hype deep within me. Members of the original development team have returned, including Brian Mitsoda, Bloodlines' lead writer. Bloodlines 2 isn't just a name, it's a statement of intent that this is the game fans have been waiting 15 years for. Hopefully this means that Paradox, a long-time attendee of the PC gaming show, come out swinging big at E3. We've had the reveal trailer to set the mood, the clan reveals to whet our appetite. Now it's time to see what the game itself actually looks like. While the world, characters and writing are what made Bloodlines an almost mythical cult classic, there was plenty of room for improvement left in the gameplay department. And with the early 2020 release date not all that far away, now's the time to show us how Bloodlines 2 will play. It wouldn't be E3 without Ubisoft's press conference leaking all over the internet in the run-up. We've seen a fairly sizable leak surrounding Roller Champions. We've had Ubisoft themselves leak their work on a Uplay subscription service. We've had developers outright admit to working on Splinter Cell for God's sake, although they claimed they were joking afterwards. All we need is an Assassin's Creed leak and we filled the bingo card. Oops, that happened as well. Except there'll be no Assassin's Creed this year, so a tour of the Viking lands will have to wait until next year. Instead, it seems we'll be diving into another Watch Dogs before the year is out. It's a fairly open secret that a third game in the franchise is on the way. We've known a few details about it, such as the setting, for a while now. But of course, with a week to go until the press conference, Watch Dogs Legions has leaked, forcing me to completely rewrite this entry at the last minute. Not that I'm mad, Legion sounds like a pretty interesting way to follow up the surprisingly great 2016 entry in the series. The game will be set in a dystopian London following Brexit, so in that regard it'll pretty much be a documentary, although I can't wait to see Ubi try to spin their way to calling this game apolitical. You'll also apparently be able to take control of any NPC in the game and play as them, which is both hella ambitious and negates their label as non-player characters. Hearing about all of this is one thing though. Seeing it is quite another, and I can't wait to see what this game actually looks like during next week's festivities. It's about damn time. Square Enix and Marvel announced the Avengers project in 2017, promising that details would be forthcoming in 2018. So naturally, Square's terribly mediocre E3 presentation came and went without a mention of the biggest superhero team-up on the planet, as did Gamescom, the Game Awards, and every other possible avenue for a game reveal, which is at least consistently on brand for the studio that spent 10 years telling us Final Fantasy XV was, quote, almost ready. Except this time Square has smartly decided to skip the speculation and get right down to business, outright telling us that the retitled Marvel's Avengers would be officially unveiled at the E3 press conference this year. That alone would be enough to get the hype juices flowing. After all, there are many avenues that Square and developer Crystal Dynamics could take the game, but thanks to this year's biggest source for E3 leaks, YouTube's E3 Coliseum, we have a few more supposed deals on the game. And it certainly seems like this could be a setup for some sort of live service Avengers game. A now deleted description of an upcoming Coliseum panel about the game mentioned both single player and co-op multiplayer, and if you're in the live service business, you have to always assure people your game can be played solo. There was also a mention of character creation, suggesting that this will be less about playing as the Avengers themselves as making your own superhero to play in that universe. Whatever Avengers actually is, we don't have long to wait to find out. Yes, the other hotly anticipated game from Square Enix that has been confirmed for their presentation. After re-emerging with a surprise trailer at Sony's last State of Play, which up until now is apparently the only way Final Fantasy VII can be shown, we've been promised a bigger look at the game at E3. Before I dive into what I'm expecting to see from Final Fantasy VII, I'd like to share a tidbit. During their end-of-year financial earnings call, Square Enix made the standard forecasts for the year ahead, speaking in vague terms about their projects so as not to accidentally reveal their entire games lineup to the journalists who were also dialed into the call. They made mention of a mystery game that would launch by March 2020 that would make them the same amount of revenue as Final Fantasy 15. What potential upcoming game could make Square Enix Final Fantasy levels of revenue, I wonder? You're probably thinking I've flipped, suggesting a game as gargantuan as FF7 could disappear from view for years, having publicly noted difficulties in development, and yet still launch in the next 9 months. It's important to remember that this is going to somehow be an episodic release, and literally every time we've seen this game, all we've seen is Midgar, the first area of the game. In my heart, I'm hoping we see something beyond FF7's elongated starting area, but my head is telling me that we'll see more of it with an early 2020 release to boot. I can't wait to find out. Look, if you watch more gaming pundits channels and podcasts than just words about games, and you really should if you don't, you'll have already heard a bunch of people talking enthusiastically about Animal Crossing's inevitable, imminent reveal who are all more qualified to do so than me. I've never played an Animal Crossing game before, just like I've never played a main Pokemon series, from partaking in a lot of their core IP. But I'm really excited to get my hands on my first ever Animal Crossing and be in debt to Tom Nook for the first time in my life. The closest I've ever gotten is getting my teeth viciously kicked out my throat by Isabelle in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. In fact, she probably came at me with such fury because I've never played Animal Crossing before. I've always admired the series from afar, wanting to play it without ever actually having the means to. Please stop hurting me. So I really don't have any grand insight to add to the Animal Crossing speculation. It's on this list simply because of the title. This is definitely one of the 10 games I'm most looking forward to seeing at E3 this year. I've seen people talking about how this will probably just be more Animal Crossing, and I'm perfectly fine with that, as someone who has never experienced that before. Looking around YouTube and Twitter, it seems like that'll be enough for the majority of fans too, and I can't wait to join in and be a part of the excitement as Nintendo pull back the curtain on what I'm sure will be the headline act of their E3 Direct. Last year, during a Words About Gamescast episode discussing another round of Valve leaks that were hilariously clinging to the belief that they were still making games instead of TF2 hats, that it was surprising that no one had tried to evolve the formula of the Left 4 Dead series. Games like Earthfall had tried to replicate it without much success, not really getting what made Left 4 Dead tick. And so, in further proof that a lot of the offhand comments I make on podcasts are apparently foreshadowing for what's to come, 2019 has given us the surprisingly solid World War Z, which borrows heavily from Left 4 Dead, so much that it even rhymes. And an announcement that Turtle Rock Studios, the original developers of the first game in the legendary co-op franchise, will be revisiting the formula with Back 4 Blood, which is about as on the nose as they could have named the game without calling it Left 4 Dead 3, subtitle, "It's about time somebody made the bloody thing." Of course, while Turtle Rock announced Back 4 Blood back in March, they spent a whole lot of words saying absolutely nothing about the game. Well, that's not entirely true. They said the same 3 things over and over. It's a co-op shooter against hordes of zombies. It's them going back to their roots. It's definitely not Left 4 Dead 3. There are no features, screenshots, gameplay videos, or anything else at all to go with this game. Hopefully that'll all change once E3 is come and gone, because what better stage is there for reviving a beloved franchise with a spiritual successor? We've heard just about every rumour it's possible to hear about whatever DC Comics game Warner Brothers has its studios cooking up. Everything from another Batman Arkham game to Batman Beyond, Superman, Justice League and more have all been speculated on at one time or another in the 4 years since Arkham Knight was released. 4 years is a long time in video game development, and both Rocksteady and WB Montreal have kept a tight lid on whatever they're working on next. But with anticipation reaching such a fever pitch that Rocksteady's co-founder Sefton Hill had to take to Twitter to calm fans down ahead of last year's Game Awards, the time to reveal what's next is now. Personally, I'm hoping that takes the form of the rumoured Batman Arkham Crisis. Supposedly in development at WB Montreal, this game would be a sequel to Arkham Origins and adapt the Court of Owls comic storyline. Of course, this announcement would keep Arkham creator Rocksteady's next game shrouded in mystery, but I'd actually be okay with that in lieu of simply learning what's next for the DC Comics line of video games. And literally, as I'm recording this, I've just seen Sefton Hill tweet that Rocksteady won't be at E3. So really Arkham Crisis, or whatever WB Montreal is working on, is our only chance at a DC game this E3. There have been leaks, which should always be taken with a grain of salt, that a Dino Crisis reboot would be at Microsoft's press conference. And there was a weird Twitter exchange, now deleted, between GameStop and SteelSeries, of all companies, that strongly suggested Dino Crisis might be about to make a comeback. It's something that comes up before every E3. Usually I don't pay much attention, because in previous years the odds of it actually happening have been infinitesimal. I think this year it could be time for Dino Crisis. I wrote as much in the show notes for our E3 Speculation podcast underneath the list of potential games Microsoft could be showing. Capcom have, for the past few years, generally made a killing releasing a game in late January, starting with Resident Evil 7 and continuing with Monster Hunter World and Resident Evil 2. It seems crazy that they would leave that money on the table in 2020 by not launching something yet again. But why would that be Dino Crisis? Well, because after Resident Evil 2 and maybe Onimusha, a Dino Crisis remake / reboot / remaster is what fans keep loudly asking for. And we've had a remake of RE2 and a remaster of Onimusha Warlords. Considering it's probably too early for either Resident Evil 8 or a remake of the third game, Capcom must have something else up their sleeve for their now traditional January release. Dino Crisis makes a lot of sense to plug that gap, redone in all the glory of the solid RE engine. And if history is indeed going to repeat itself, we'll get a surprising announcement somewhere at E3. Just like with RE7, and Monster Hunter World, and RE2. It's time for Dino Crisis. The fact that we've only just started to see Final Fantasy VII Remake again should preclude the idea that we'd see any glimpse of the next mainline entry in the series, right? After all, it took Square Enix 10 years and multiple reveals just to kick FF15 out the door, so the idea that FF16 could possibly make an appearance at Square Enix's E3 presentation should be inconceivable. Except, Final Fantasy XV was very much an outlier in the way Square Enix treats their biggest IP. In fact, before the franchise went into a suffocatingly protracted radio silence as we waited for the 15th installment, it felt like Square was constantly building hype for whatever the next Final Fantasy was, usually before most people had even finished whatever the current one was. If you look at the history of how Square generally treats its golden franchise, it's actually inconceivable that we haven't heard anything about 16 yet. Final Fantasy XV has been out for 2.5 years. Its DLC episodes are done and in the hands of players, and now, for the first time in a long time, we're left with no idea what's next for the main branch of the Final Fantasy series. Sorry, remakes don't count. Surely Square aren't going to leave it to sit for too long. After all, FF15 was well received and sold well. It's about time they told us what's next for the franchise going forward, even if all they show us is a short teaser to whet our appetites for the main reveal. Unlike everything that's come before this on the wishful thinking portion of this list, there's no deductive reasoning behind my thoughts that we might get a reveal of the next Nier game at Square's E3 presentation this year. I don't have a series of logical arguments or historical observations to back any of this up. I just really, really love Nier Automata and would really, really like another one, please and thank you. Plus, it's always good to see Yoko Taro take the stage at any gaming event. Seriously, I'm not about to dazzle you with 2 paragraphs of thought-out musings as to why this game could potentially be a thing at E3. I just bloody love Nier Automata, and I'll be sad if another one isn't revealed. I loved its amazing, deep, and emotional story. I loved its world and the gorgeous visuals. I loved its characters. Heck, I love the soundtrack so much I threatened to stab Keith with a screwdriver in a recent episode of Friendly Debates for daring to try to cut it from the final list. And would definitely do that again. So, more, please? And while we're on the subject of illogical, pie-in-the-sky wishful thinking, why, in the name of all that is good in the universe, are we still waiting for that one amazing Star Trek RPG? The franchise has been alive and kicking since the 1960s, with one of the richest, deepest worlds of any IP I can think of, and no one has managed to realise that making an RPG out of it might be kind of a good idea. We've had just about everything else. An MMO, a 4X strategy game, one of the best VR games you can experience, a pair of awesome first-person shooters, some cool point-and-click adventure games. Even that weird DVD game with Q and the Borg was pretty decent. But we've never had an RPG. I've wondered for a while whether Bridge Crew was a precursor to something bigger. It seems mad that Ubisoft got hold of the Star Trek license just to make one virtual reality game, no matter how awesome it is. Every year I secretly hope that they'll come out at E3 and say, hey, remember Star Trek Bridge Crew? That was an awesome game, But how about a full-fledged Star Trek RPG? It's one of the reasons I keep Keith with me for E3 press conferences, to stop me from destroying everything in arm's reach in case that ever happened. With Netflix, the distributors of 3 current and upcoming Star Trek series, throwing their hats into the E3 ring and teasing game announcements to boot, I'm hopeful that at long last, someone, somewhere, is about to answer my prayers. I'm also hopeful that, should the moment finally arrive, Keith is able to restrain me. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please leave us a comment, like, or subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've got tons of awesome videos coming every week, including review impressions, indie game of the week, debate-driven top 5 lists, video essays, and our weekly podcast where we discuss games, gaming culture, and the games industry. We also stream 3 times a week at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames. But most importantly, have a fantastic day.